Some years there's a player that is just the consensus number one at their position all the way through. They start there, they are there in the middle of the season. At the end of the year, they finish strong. But there's also many times where there's a guy that kind of comes out of nowhere to be the number one overall player at their position. And I have one guy for each of the major positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, that I think realistically could be the number one overall player at the position. Now, am I necessarily projecting that? No. In my projections, obviously, I have to be conservative in a lot of it. And a lot of these guys will not even finish in the top 5 necessarily. But if I was going to take a shot on a dark horse player to finish number one overall at the position, these would be the players that I'd be looking at. Let's start off with the running back position, and I'm looking at De'Von Achane. Last year, De'Von Achane finished as running back 5 overall. So this is probably, of all the players that I have, the one that's the easiest to see. This is the one that's the most likely to happen of all the players. Right now, he's being drafted, though, in redraft as RB7. Now, yes, this has both redraft and dynasty implications on how they finish. So right now, being looked at as the running back 7 in redraft ADP. But there's a lot of things going his way. One, with him being that good last year, running back 5, he did it while only having 4.5 yards per carry. His season before that, 7.8. We just didn't see as many opportunities for that huge, long, explosive play that we know he is very capable of making. So if that normalizes a little bit and we see that closer to the 5.5 range, which I think is within reason, he could be an absolute smash. We also have to remember he has the 4th easiest schedule, so it's a very easy schedule. And if we were to only just take the games that he played with Tua versus the games where Tua was gone, well, he averaged 22.6 points per game last year with Tua. In games without Tua, yeah, he was below 10 points per game. So you look at the number one overall running back last year, which was Jahmyr Gibbs through week 18, 21.3 points. He's already projected to do that if he just plays his games with Tua and does exactly what he did last year. I think he'll do that, but I think he'll do even a little bit more. I think he's going to be more efficient on the ground while still being a very good receiving running back. There's a real shot for De'Von Achane to be running back 1 overall. I'm doing these in order that I think are the most likely to the least likely. And so the next one, let's move to the tight end position. And I'm going to say David Njoku ends up being the number 1 overall tight end at the position. Now, I know that there's significantly bigger names ahead of him. Guys like George Kittle, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, even some guys that have done it before, like a Mark Andrews or a Travis Kelce. Yes, there's a lot of players that could finish there. But David Njoku, I think, is in a really interesting spot. We are more than likely going to be getting a Joe Flacco as QB1 situation, at least to start the year. And if there's somebody that would come in, it would probably be a Shedeur Sanders, who we know is a very accurate quarterback. But let's base things on Joe Flacco for a second. Joe Flacco, he did already spend some time in Cleveland in this exact same offense with a lot of the same supporting cast. While David Njoku was there, he averaged 21.8 points with Joe Flacco at the helm. So he was crazy efficient. If you had him in playoff teams in 2023, you're well aware of how good he was for your fantasy football team. And he was doing good things in the target department too, nearly 10 targets a game at 9.75 during that stretch. But you're like, well, that's a short sample size. I get it. Last year, in games that were finished by any non-Deshaun Watson quarterback, so guys that might have come in or whatever, any game that was a non-Deshaun Watson game, he averaged 16.2 points per game. Last year, the tight end 1 averaged 15.5. So there's plenty of paths here with this regime and with this quarterback to potentially be the number 1 tight end overall. And right now, he's going off the board as tight end 9 in redraft. So I think he's still young enough in Dynasty that he is a great target, but also in redraft this year, he could be an absolute smash at his current ADP. Like I said before, I'm going most likely to least likely. We had De'Von Achane, we had David Njoku, and then the wide receiver that I think is a dark horse to finish as wide receiver 1 overall is Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Jaxon Smith-Njigba last year was wide receiver 9, but now he's going off the board as wide receiver 16, which I find kind of interesting because you factor in that he lost DK Metcalf and he lost Tyler Lockett, 2 guys that are good wide receivers that were commanding targets. Yes, they added Cooper Kupp back into the mix, but that's not somebody at this point in his career that I'd be overly afraid of. So they replaced one of the guys, but they didn't really replace the other. So JSN should get more targets and percentage of the target share. Looking at what he did last year, he was actually 30th in target share, despite finishing as wide receiver 9. So at only 24.4%, I wouldn't be surprised to see that closer to the 26 to 28% range, which would obviously boost his numbers quite significantly. And then you just have to look at what he did in the touchdown department. He was a little bit unlucky. The guy only had 6 touchdowns on the season. With that type of target volume, he should be much closer to that 8, 9, 10 range, whereas he only had 6. All these things come together for JSN, which I think they will. I think he's a very, very talented player. And I do believe Sam Darnold's a good enough quarterback to get him the football. I think we should see JS1 as a top tier guy and maybe even sneak in as the wide receiver 1 overall. All right, this one's my biggest stretch, and I'm going to admit that on the onset. I'm going to say the name, and there's going to be many of you that balk at this as a player that could potentially be the number 1 overall guy at his position. I'm going with Drake Maye. Yes, there's other guys that would be fun to talk about, but Drake Maye, I think, is really interesting. Right now, he's going off the board at quarterback 18. So in redraft, he's an absolute steal. I'm absolutely getting him as my quarterback too, just on the potential upside. In games that he started and finished last year, I don't think people realize how good he was. He averaged 17.35 points per game. Well, that would have been good enough for a top 12 quarterback in points per game. So if that's the case, if he can build on what he did last year, things should be better, right? Well, last year he also only had the 28th most yards per attempt on his passes. So he was not throwing the ball downfield nearly as much as we see some other guys, or if they were just not complete because of his utter lack of receiving options. They added 2 really key pieces this offseason in the wide receiver room. They added a Stephon Diggs, which helped Josh Allen become the quarterback that he became. Drake Maye, a very similar type of quarterback, which is interesting. Then you added a Kyle Williams, a guy that they took in the 3rd round, a good field stretching type player that can make some huge plays. They also added Travion Henderson, a good receiving back that's good in pass pro. And with their first overall pick, the 4th pick in the 1st round, they added a left tackle. So he's going to have more time. All of these things spell that he could be a guy that would rise up boards. And when you factor in what he does on the ground, average 7.8 yards per carry, which is really, really impressive. Even if that number drops to 7 or 6.5, he is still, if he's going to be utilizing his legs, he is going to be getting a ton of points for fantasy football managers. So I think this is a better team, a better coaching staff, and I think he's going to have a better opportunity to finish as one of the top quarterbacks and maybe even the number 1 overall guy. Guys, if you like this video and like this kind of content, please make sure you hit the like button for us. Subscribe to this channel because we have stuff coming out daily to tickle your fantasy football cravings. Who do you guys have as a sneaky dark horse player to finish as the number 1 overall guy at their spot? Put those in the comments below, and who knows, we might even pick one of those comments to win a prize.